Thanks for doing this. Before we start, can you tell the folks your name, where you were born, and a little bit about your childhood? Real plain and simple, brief answers.
Well, honey, my name's Irene Bendy Darby. I was born February 9th, 1961, down in Pinhook, right by Rocky Mount, Virginia. I grew up on a 100-acre farm, tobacco rows as far as you could see, a little house, and my grandma running the place after Grandpa passed. That farm was my whole world. When we worked from sunup to sundown, I remember at the end of the week, picking tobacco, I'd have 55 pennies in my pocket, and I'd trot down to the general store for a Dr. Pepper and some candy. Felt like I had the world in those moments.
You always talk about grandma. What was she like?
Oh, Lord. She was tough as hickory and soft as a warm biscuit at the same time. After Grandpa died, she kept the farm together. She taught me how to wash clothes on the scrub board, how to feed the boy, how to stand up when the wind blows. She was my hero, my first teacher. I watched her learn how to be stubborn in a good way.
Your mama Lillian. She had a hard time with her mental health. How did that shape you?
Mama was in and out of the mental hospital a lot. Schizophrenia, they called it. Some days she was there, some days she wasn't. That meant I had to grow up quicker than most kids. I learned to take care of things, to keep the house steady. Folks in town whispered about it. Some were kind, some were cruel. That's why I learned early not to judge. I seen how folks get treated when they're different, and I swore I wouldn't be like that.
Your dad, Edmund. People know he was arrested when you were young. Tell us about that.
My daddy was taken away when I was a little girl. He was convicted of murder. I never had a real relationship with him, even when he got out in 2012. I didn't go run into him. It was better for me that way. I had my grandma and my mama, and that was enough. Some things you just don't need in your life to move forward.
You grew up in the 60s and the 70s. You were a kid when big things happened. Martin Luther King Jr., President Kennedy. What do you remember about those times?
I remember the radio and that little black and white TV like it was yesterday. I was small when JFK was shot. Folks were stunned. I remember Jackie Kennedy on the screen. She looked so pretty and so calm, like a picture. People in town talked about it like it was the end of the world. Some said he was bringing too much change, and others were scared. It was confusing for a kid. And after Martin Luther King Jr., I remember hearing him on the radio and watching him on TV. There was something about him, like he spoke gentle but fierce, and I felt it in my bones that he was going to give everything for what he believed. When he was killed, it felt like the air went out. Folks in our town, some cheered, some cursed. I remember seeing news footage of people getting beat, arrested, and it made me sick. That's when I first started thinking maybe the world needs to be different. Those two men, JFK and Dr. King, made me start paying attention to the politics and to what's right. It
You said you didn't see many black people until high school. What was that like? I bet that was weird.
was strange. Where I grew up, things were still pretty divided. We had our side and they had theirs. I didn't have many black friends as a little girl. Most of my friends were cousins. When I finally met black kids in middle school and high school, I realized how wrong it was to keep folks apart. I remember one time at a gas station, some man said something nasty to a black family. I felt my face burn. I didn't understand why folks could be so mean. That's when I decided I wouldn't be like that. I'd rather be the one who reached out.
So you got involved in marches and groups later on. What pushed you into activism?
Seeing the news, seeing people beaten, seeing the marches stirred something in me. When I went to the community college in Rocky Mount area, took my CNA classes at Patrick and Henry Community College, I met folks who were talking about women's rights and civil rights. I joined groups, went to marches in town, and even went to the Washington a time or two for women's marches. In the 70s and 80s, I walked with folks who wanted equal pay, equal rights, and a fair shot. It felt right. I wanted my kids to grow up in a world where they weren't judged for who they were.
So you went to nursing school later on? When was that?
I was in school from 1986 to 1990 at Fayetteville Tech. I worked nights at the hospital and went to class by day. It was hard, Lord, it was hard, but I loved it. Holding someone's hand when they're scared, helping folks breathe a little easier, that's where I felt useful. Nursing gave me a way out of the small town life folks expected from me.
Hmm. So let's change the subject a little. So you and Dad, y'all moved to England for a while. How was that?
Oh, England was a whole other world. Kevin was stationed there in the early 90s. I remember the first time we walked up to the Buckingham Palace. They just started letting folks in for tours in the summers, and I thought, like, that's something. The palace was grand, but the tea was weak, and nothing tasted like it had sugar in it. We saw a big old cathedral, green hills, and people who spoke different, friendly. The whole Charles and Diana thing was on every. People were talking about it everywhere. It made the world feel small and loud at the same time.
You raised three kids. Me, obviously, my brother, and my sister. You sacrificed a lot. Tell me about that.
I did what any mama would do. After the divorce in the early 2000s, I worked full time, took extra shifts, and sometimes I skipped meals so the kids could have what they needed. I wanted you kids to have more than I had, more safety, more chances, and more schooling. I never wanted you to grow up carrying the same weight I did. I wanted you to dream. I missed things, school plays, some birthdays, but I did it so you'd have a better life. That's a mama's job. I'd do it again 100 times.
When did you find out about me being gay? And how did that change you and, what you thought about it?
I knew you were my child first when you told me. I felt proud. Proud of you for being honest and brave. I remember the first Pride March I went to you with. My heart swelled. I started speaking up more, were making sure policies were fair, and I marched with you. When same-sex marriage became legal in 2015, I cried like a baby. That and Obama's election in 2008, those were two of the biggest moments I've seen. It felt like proof that things can change for better.
And I appreciate you always being there and supporting me through, you know, all of that, going to Pride and, changing your ways a little bit there. So thank you for that. Okay. So how did technology change in your life? You grew up with radios and a few television channels.
Oh, honey, it's a whole different world. When I was a kid, we had a radio and maybe 6 channels on TV. But by the 90s, the internet and cell phones started showing up. I remember getting my first computer and thinking, what in the world? But it made things easier. Kept me in touch with family when we moved, helped with work, and let me learn new things. Y2K had folks worried the light would go out. We laughed about it later. Still, I miss the slow day sometimes. Sitting on the porch listening to the crickets.
That does sound peaceful. So, Mom, I remember where I was on September 11th. Um, how did September 11th make you feel?
That day felt like ground opened up. We were in Fayetteville at the time, near the base. I remember watching the TV and seeing the planes and the smoke, thinking, this cannot be real. After that, everything changed. Reports got strict, folks were scared, and I lay awake nights thinking, if this could happen here, what else could happen? It made me hold on to you kids tighter. It made me realize how fragile things are and how important it is to love the people close to you.
I remember that day. It was very scary. I was in elementary school. I didn't know what was going on. That was a really strange day, and now I know a little bit about it. So, what causes have meant the most for you over the years?
Uh, Women's rights and civil rights. Those were big. A march for equal pay for fair treatment, for folks to be seen. And when you came out, the LGBTQ, it became personal. I fought for fair wages for nurses, better care for patients, and for mental health to be treated with dignity. Because I saw the shame it did to my mama. Those things aren't just politics to me, they're about people's lives.
Hmm. If you could do anything over, what would it be? What would you change?
I'd slow down.
Hmm.
I'd put the kids first a little more. I'd go to school plays and read more bedtime stories. I thought I had to do everything at once, but I wish I had known you can chase your dreams and still be there for your children. That's the one thing I tell my younger self.
Very nice, very nice. What do you want people to remember about your mom besides you're fucking amazing?
That I loved hard and worked harder. That I tried to be kind when folks weren't. That I stood up for my family and for folks who needed a hand. And that a little country girl from 100-acre farm can make a life that matters. If folks sit on my front porch long enough, I'll teach them how to love folks right and how to be a decent human.
We'll say, we'll say that you have a huge heart and you taught me so much. Any last words for the kids and for the folks listening, and just for anyone?
Well, for first, don't be afraid to stand up. Love louder than you're scared. And remember, slow down. Children first. Know you can do both. That's the best advice I got from my mama and my grandma. And I'm passing it on to you.
Very good. So, just to wrap this up and everything, I want to thank my mom for doing this, Bendy Darby. Also, I want to thank my professor and the clients if they watch this. This was an awesome project. It really allowed me to learn more about my mom. And, it allowed me to, just see, how she turned out the way she was and, just the different times and stuff it was back then. Still kind of blows my mind a little bit about the race issues and, that people like me didn't have their rights till, 2015. And it took to 2008 for a president to be black, and, our world's finally starting to catch up a little bit and people are starting to love each other more. But, just I think the biggest thing I took away from this whole project is you just got to stay tough and you got to love people for who they are and don't judge. Thank you, everyone, and I hope y'all have a wonderful day.